Hello, and welcome to Never Run Out of Story Ideas, How to Discover Your Writing Niche. It's really great to see everyone in the chat. I'm Harris from Medium. I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Shern. I work with Harris in creator support for Medium. It is so nice to see so many people here from all over the world in the chat. We're actually going to turn off the chat now so we don't all get distracted, but any questions that you have for us, we will have a Q&A period at the end. So you're welcome to add Q&As. There's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And so you can, please, if you have any questions, put them there and we will try to get to as many as we can. At the end, there's a lot of you, so it probably won't be all of them, but it's so nice to see you all here.
Yeah,
welcome to the, yes, all over the world. And I'm just here in Brooklyn. Welcome to the first creator workshop of our winter 2022 season. Harris and I work in creator support for Medium. We also work on the Publication Creators Hub, which is Medium's publication for writers and specifically for writers on Medium. So please check it out. We'll be sharing some posts from there throughout the workshop. Yeah, and actually first, Harris, you were going to share a poll, right?
Yeah, so we wanted to get a sense of, so this workshop is really about how to find your niche as a writer. And we wanted to get a little bit of a sense of what that looks like for each of you currently. So I'm going to share a quick poll just about your writing practice and how you write right now. So take a second to answer. All right, so here are the results. It looks like most of us, and I think I fall into this camp too, our ideas tend to come in fits and starts. I definitely relate to that. A few geniuses in the workshop are swimming in ideas. I'm jealous. Yeah, and then staring at a blank page, I think we've all been there, and a bunch of us where it takes a while for us to figure out what to write about. Yeah, so Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about how this sort of relates to the topic of today's workshop?
You know, I do. Okay, so we have this theory that if you have a writing niche, it makes it much easier to always have an idea. You know, so much of writing is about finding constraints that actually give you more freedom creatively. And I really think that finding a niche as a writer just makes your creative life that much easier. You're not starting from scratch every time you sit down to write. No, I mean, maybe I'm the only one who has like a mini existential crisis when I open up a new Medium draft and see that little gray tell your story. But if you know sort of your beat or your thing as a writer, every time you sit down to write, you kind of know where to start. You know, it shouldn't be something that makes you feel constrained creatively. This is really meant to be a set of useful guardrails that makes your writing life easier. It's also a spectrum. You get to decide how firmly you want to stay in your niche or how kind of tight your beat is. And you can also grow and change as a writer, but first you got to get started. So Harris is going to share some slides that we have.
All right, so just to echo what Amy said, I think, you know, a niche is something that you can grow into, and there's a wide spectrum of how you develop this for yourself, but we'll go over a few questions that you can ask yourself as you try to think about what your unique niche or beat is as a writer. And the first one is asking yourself, honestly, what are your writing goals? Why are you writing? What brings you to the blank page? There are lots and lots of different reasons to write. This is one quote from Zadie Smith that I really love. Writing is my way of expressing and thereby eliminating all the various ways we can be wrong-headed, which I think is one goal and is a really noble goal, I think, for writing. There are obviously a lot of reasons people come to the page. You can write to build your personal brand, write to share professional expertise, investigate something you're curious about. Some of us write just because we want to take creative risks. We want to play with language. We just want to connect with people around us, people who we care about. And we want to create community or build awareness around something that matters to us. And on the right, these are two creators on Medium, and Miranda, who works with us and is in the chat, will drop links to their profiles. But Allison Gaines is a writer on Medium who's really popular on Medium. And Allison Gaines we actually did a spotlight of Allison Gaines in the Creators Hub recently, and Allison Gaines said something I really like, which is that writing for her is a way to leave the world a little bit better than she found it. And it's a form of peaceful protest, which I really appreciate. And I think that's really unique to Allison and a purpose that brings her to the page every day. And you can see that come through in her work. By contrast, Daniel Williams is another writer who is writing for a very different goal and a very different reason. He writes to entertain. He does illustrated stories about his life and his childhood. They're very funny, they're sort of offbeat, and they're unexpected. And his goal, I would guess, is to really take creative risks and to also entertain people and bring them joy. So here's one writer, another writer, Roger Martin, who has another specific goal that brings him to writing, which is to serve business leaders. And so Roger Martin is a writer, he's a strategy advisor, he's written a book about strategy for business leaders. And we actually did an interview with Roger in the Creators Hub, and he told us that his real goal with writing is to help readers by giving them a better way of thinking tomorrow about something that vexes them today. So he wants to help people sort of see that there are possibilities to make things in their business lives and their professional worlds better than they currently are. And strategy is his sort of way to do that. And these are a few examples on the right of Roger Martin's stories, and you'll see they're all very specific. They're really focused on business strategy for business leaders. And as he kept going, he gave himself another quantitative goal, which was to write. He wanted to do a 1,600 word post on average for publication every Monday morning. And that was a challenge that he gave himself. And another sort of goal for him was to push himself creatively as a strategist and as a writer on Medium. So that was sort of a secondary goal. And I think those are all examples of different reasons that people write and things that they want to get out of writing. So the first step, I think, is really asking yourself what you want to get out of this experience at the end. Amy?
Yeah, that was great. Harris, as you were talking, it made me think, maybe this is obvious, but it seems like another big part of that is what your niche does for you. I mean, Roger Martin, he wants to help business strategists and he's really interested in this stuff, but also it helps build his brand as a management strategist.
Right.
I mean, maybe everyone already knew that, but I was just thinking.
Yeah.
Significant. Okay, here's another question that you can ask yourself, which is, what's your 30-minute TED Talk? Another way to ask this question is what's the one thing you could talk about for 30 minutes uninterrupted without any preparation? Which we kind of stole from a tweet that I think is on the next slide, right? Did we include that?
Yep.
There it is. I mean, borrowed. I mean, he inspired us. But when you think about it, it's such a great way to distill what really interests you, sort of what you love to think and write about and talk about, what you're known for. I think the key is to not think too hard. Don't worry if your answer is something that most people don't seem to talk about much. Like maybe you love insects, maybe you love an obscure musical genre no one else has ever heard of. Just asking yourself this is a nice way to sort of identify your core interests. So you have an impromptu TED Talk, sort of like a great writing exercise or a terrible nightmare, just for people who already know and love you. You're on the stage. What topic are you going to choose? So some of the questions to ask yourself to get there are, what are your secret obsessions, your hobbies, your unique interests? What are you interested in? I feel like it's so, as a writer, I mean, really, so many of the rewards are so intrinsic. I'm sorry to say, if you're, you know, hoping to become a millionaire, but like one of, you know, often writing is going to be its own reward. And so you have to really follow your interests. Like you have to be entertaining yourself and making it fun for you. And if you're writing what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, your readers are going to be interested in it too. And it's going to stay fun for you, because it really has to stay fun in some way. What are you an expert in? What do you find yourself explaining to friends, family, coworkers? What keeps you up at night in a good way or in a bad way? Questions that you're just always trying to figure out. We have two examples here of creators. Cassie, I have no idea how you say her last name, knows all about AI, and her job is head of decision intelligence. Can you imagine, at Google? And so she's obviously really passionate about AI, really interested in it. It's what she does professionally, and then she writes about it. Makes sense. Then we have someone like Emily Carney, who is a space historian, pretty, and space hipster. Pretty unusual beat she has, and something that probably a lot of people can't read to or can't write to, but are interested in reading about. And then next, I think on the next slide, we have Nicole Valentin. Yeah, there she is. A history lover who can't stand boring facts. You know, when you look through her profile, her stories are so fascinating. Medieval people believed in an animal that shot out fiery dung. Yes, Nicole, tell us more. Could the Trojan horse really have existed? The forgotten history of feminist fairy tales. So interesting, and stuff that we know she can tell us something about it that no one else can. And then we have another creator with a highly defined niche in a totally different way. This profile, more to that, all of their posts share a style. They're these illustrated kind of thought experiments, explorations into the human condition. They have unique perspective and these really interesting animations, but the actual subjects that are covered are quite broad. It's nothing so specific as space history. It's more that the way they cover those topics through these unique cartoons is really specific and one of a kind. So I just want everybody to do a little writing exercise for a second. Take 1 minute and write down wherever you want to write it down. This is just for you, what your 30-minute TED Talk would be. I mean, I don't even think you need a minute. I think you maybe need 30 seconds. It should be the first thing that comes to mind. So we'll take a little bit of time and just write that down. Don't judge it, whatever comes up. Okay, you got it. At the end of this workshop, we're going to share, as I said, a post on Creators Hub that sort of summarizes what we went through. And any of these writing exercises, you're welcome to drop whatever you came up with, to drop it in the comments of that post. I'd be so interested to know what people's TED Talks are. Okay.
Yeah. I also just want to say, quick plug for More to That. I think their stories are also a really good example of this is an aside, but they're a really good example of how to use Medium for more than just words and for illustrations or for visual expression. I think they do that really well, and their stories are really interesting to read. Cool. So the next question is to sort of step outside of yourself for a moment and think as your best friends or anyone who knows you well, maybe your second best friends, and think about how they would describe you. So sometimes I think this is a really good way of getting at how you're unique and what your sort of unique thing is in the minds of the people who know you best and the people who know all the different sides of you. That could be your best friends. That could, I think, honestly, sometimes it's helpful to think of acquaintances or second best friends because they have sort of a more like pointy picture of you. Like they don't know the whole picture. They just know like the things that really stick out if they've only met you once or twice. And I think that can be a good way to get a sense of what your thing is, what your niche is, what you bring to your relationships and what kind of energy you have. Yeah, so some questions along these lines. What unique perspective or energy do you bring to relationships with people who know you best? What are you their go-to source for? Whether that's information or humor or sarcasm or a certain kind of advice that you give. And how do people describe you to other people? And then what are your idiosyncrasies? What kinds of things do people tag you in on social media? What things do they email you or forward you, knowing that you are the person who would appreciate this article or this photo or this meme? So we'll take 1 minute to think briefly about how your best friends or second best friends would describe you in 2 or 3 sentences. We can also do 30 seconds, just very briefly, with the Clueless GIF as an inspiration. So as Amy said, at the end, we'll share a worksheet. And if you got any inspiration from this exercise about how you're unique or sort of what this made you realize about yourself and about what you can write about and what interests you.
Uh-oh. Harris, are you frozen? Or am I frozen? Oh. Okay, well, in case, 1 second. Oh, Harris is frozen. Okay, hi. Hi. So remember when Harris froze that one time? It was crazy. Okay, so I will, let's see. Oh, Harris, you're back.
Hi.
Hi, we missed you.
So were we doing the exercise?
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next slide of what you enjoy.
Yeah, great.
I was thinking the question of like what you get tagged in, I feel like is so good. I think about that every time someone tags me in something that's about books about weird people. I'm like, really? Interesting. I'm learning a lot. It's my favorite. Okay. So we have both worked with a lot of writers and over the years. And something that I think is like a concern that a lot of writers have, especially if they're kind of just starting out, is like, what's my style? I don't know what my style is. Do I have a style? And the good news is you probably do have a style. It's just sometimes a little hard to pinpoint it. But a good way in, kind of like a secret key to discovering your style, is to just ask yourself what you enjoy. Sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly what you want to write, what your style is or should be, but you probably have a style and like, you know, on some level what it is. And there's a sort of diagnostic that makes it easier to take a step back and see. Harris, can you go to the next slide? There it is. The slides are acting up. So something you can ask yourself is, what kind of media do you like to take in? What books, movies, TV shows, music, social feeds? Make a list of the first ones that pop to mind. And I think for this to work properly, you have to be real, not ideal. Like, don't try to impress anyone, not what you think is cool or would make you sound smart. Just what do you really love? You're trying to pinpoint what makes you light up. So everyone just take like 20 seconds to do that. Just scribble down some of your most favorite media and medium creators that you follow, maybe, especially if they're me or Harris or anyone else. Okay, so once you've written down some of those, the next step is to see what are the through lines you see in all of the stuff that you consume and that you love to take in. It might be really obvious. Maybe you just love like gritty police procedurals and you happen to be a detective. How cool, if so. And I think you know what your beat is. Maybe it's a little more abstract. Maybe they all share strange humor or an element of magic or a strong female lead. I just did mine. Those were my through lines. As I learned when I did this exercise myself. Now you're getting at what you value. And think about what you can write that will draw in the elements of these through lines. You know, writing is a long game, but it is a game. You got to keep yourself interested and keep it fun for yourself. And sometimes your niche evolves. Jane Park is a writer who is an entrepreneur and CEO who started off on Medium writing work and career content. And that makes sense. And she's an expert in these areas. She's the CEO of a company. She thinks about work and career a lot. And as she has developed her voice as a writer, and as she's been writing more and more on Medium, she's started publishing more and more personal essays. And I've talked to her about it. And she said, you know, she never really meant to do that. She realized that that's what she really loves to read. That's what really interests her. That's what she would write, even if no one was reading. So she started doing that more and more. And the essays can offer as much insight into the life of a successful business leader as her instructional articles do. And, you know, her readers will go there with her. You know, your readers are happy to see different things from you. So maybe we can pause here and take a couple more minutes just to write about, so what are the through lines that you see? And what are you starting to learn about your style? Just a few minutes. Okay, have you uncovered all the mysteries of your personal style now? Great. What's next, Harris?
Yeah, so next is thinking about what's realistic for you to set yourself up for success as a writer. So now that you've sort of gone on this vision quest to unpack your style, sort of what interests you, what your friends say about you, what matters to you, and what you want to get out of writing, I think a really important step is to think about what's realistic for you in terms of a publishing cadence, so you can really set yourself up for success as a writer. And there are lots of different ways to do this. Also, as Amy said at the beginning, one of the most important aspects of writing and creativity in general is setting guardrails for yourself and setting constraints that really enable you to be more creative when you set a schedule for yourself or think about a goal of how often you want to publish. And these things are flexible, but I think setting those kinds of guidelines can be really beneficial as a writer when you're starting. So Darius is an example of a writer who is very popular on Medium. We love Darius. And Darius writes about philosophy. He writes self-help. He writes inspirational stories to help other people live better lives. And one thing that he started doing recently is he started these Stoic letters, which he publishes every week. And this was a way for Darius to really structure his writing life. So every week he would say to himself, okay, I'm going to write one of these Stoic letters. I'm going to focus on some aspect of Stoicism, something Epictetus said, a quote, something that sort of applies to the moment, feels a little bit timely. And it's a short letter that he writes to his followers. And it's a really clearly defined project with a goal. And those letters continue to circulate on Medium for long after he publishes them. So this is an example of sort of a weekly cadence that you can give yourself if that suits you and what you're interested in. Another example, sort of on the other side of the spectrum, is this other writer who I absolutely love, Sophie Lucido Johnson, who is a self-described person who writes and draws and eats her feelings. And Sophie writes these illustrated essays that really don't have a schedule. And I think this is another way to do it. You know, you don't need a really regimented schedule. You can publish whenever it works for you. And I think Sophie maybe publishes once a month, once every few months. And her fans know what they're going to get from her stories. They're going to get a little bit of humor. They're going to get maybe some advice. They're going to get a few beautiful illustrations. And they'll get that like sort of unique Sophie perspective that comes through in her art and in her words. And I think for a lot of creators, they work best when they write only when sort of inspiration strikes. And so they're not necessarily churning things out for the sake of a schedule, but they're writing because they have something to say and they're saying it whenever it's right for them. And I think you don't need to sort of overdetermine when you're publishing all the time. And those are just sort of two examples on either side of the spectrum for publishing cadence. Amy, anything else on Sophie or Darius?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's both such good examples of they're total opposites in style and cadence, but for both of them, I think what they have decided to do gives them more freedom. It helps them to, Sophie, I think, is just one of those people who I think is just kind of ideas appear and then she writes about them. She had a piece that's doing really well on Medium right now that is about lotion and how it's nice to buy yourself hand lotion. And it's just, I mean, who cares about lotion? It's just that the way she writes and has these beautiful illustrations, it's more like you're getting her take on it. And you can tell she just was struck by inspiration to write about lotion. And then you have a writer like Darius Faroo who I think he's just a little more like regimented of a person. I think to him it feels really good and really helpful to have this rule of publishing once a week because readers know what to expect. Um, and I don't know, it's like the theory of kind of telling yourself you're going to work out every day. Just don't make it a question, just do it.
Yeah.
I don't do that. Seems like a good
Yeah,
idea.
I think so more to that has this really good post that maybe we can drop in the chat, called like good enough is just fine. And I think it's sort of about the idea that your creative life is a journey, sort of like Amy said, it's a long game, and you're going to publish more than one thing as you go. And I think Darius is a really good example of that because he's publishing like when things are ready, not when they're perfect, but when they're ready, knowing that like he'll keep going and the next thing will be another like try.
That's exactly right.
And another example of like how to push himself more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's good. You're smart. Okay, so our last question to ask yourself is what's your elevator pitch? Okay, so the elevator pitch concept, if you haven't come across it yet, it's kind of familiar, I think, to anyone who's worked in publishing or media. The idea is it's like a thought experiment. Like imagine you find yourself in an elevator with a big time editor, producer, I don't know, nowadays influencer maybe. And you have a few seconds, how long's an elevator ride? 15 seconds to pitch your big idea. Do you have it ready? Can you distill your writing or project into 5 to 10 words? This can be a really helpful exercise because it forces you to get really clear about what you're doing. To be clear, don't really do this if you're in the elevator with someone. Good God. And so in the next slide we have, yes, there she is stepping off the elevator. Someone just pitched her. What's your unique thing? Your project, what you're writing, your passion. Just to look at some of the writers that we've already talked about, Roger Martin's elevator pitch might be something like management strategist writing weekly about business and decision making. I get it. Jane Parks might be something like entrepreneur writing about career, business, and growing up Asian American. It's a little bit wider of a niche. She writes about more different kinds of things than Roger Martin does, but I feel like I kind of get what it's going to be. Okay, so this is your last little writing exercise, and then we will be answering some questions. But so now take a few minutes and describe your unique thing, your niche, in 5 to 10 words. It's okay if you don't actually really know what it is, but you can just take a crack at it. And then again, if you like, you can share it in the comments of the post that we'll share in a little bit. Okay, so take a few minutes, ride that elevator of the mind. Okay, got it. That was a long elevator ride. Y'all just went to like the top of the Empire State Building. Okay. So, and again, I'll just share it now. There's this post on Creators Hub that we just published, where if you'd like, you can talk to us in the comments, put your elevator pitch there, put anything else you want there. I mean, within reason, and we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so a few takeaways from this journey that we've just been on together. Writing and all creativity is really about setting your own rules and adjusting them along the way. And constraints can be really freeing if you choose them correctly, and if you choose ones that work for you. An example is having a clear niche, something that can help you focus your energy and can help you figure out what to write next. And I think this is really the key, is write about something you genuinely enjoy, something you're actually curious about, something that will give you satisfaction no matter the external rewards, something that you'll do for the sake of writing about it, something that really like lights you up. And there's also no right way to write. Don't get too attached to what works. Creativity is about following your interests, instincts, and figuring out what works for you, and also pushing yourself. Once you figure out what works, that's the time to try something new, and the time to challenge yourself even more. And now we will move into Q&A.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here and joining us. And we've had a lot of great questions. Someone asked, said, I have ideas, but I'm never quite sure if they will be interesting to others. I feel that. Or if there has been too much written about certain topics and they may not be adding anything new. Well, I think the good news is that if you look at, I mean, the world of the internet and all of literature, you know, there's that old saying that there's, you know, only 2 or 3 stories. Like we're kind of all writing the same thing. That's okay. Your writing is inherently singular because you're writing it. You have an experience of being alive in the world that literally no one else does, and probably your own way of seeing things. So I think it's really easy as a writer to get tangled up in the question of like, does the world need this? Does the world need another writer? Like, I mean, no, but who cares? Do you need to write? Do you want to write? Then you should, and it's important, and people will find it and read it. Yeah, your writing is unique because you are. Harris, you want to take one?
Yeah, so we got a question. How do we balance the need for a niche with growth in terms of an audience? For example, I write philosophy, which doesn't seem to have that big of an audience. And when I write on productivity, I find that I could get many more readers. I think a really good approach to this is combining your interests into something that is, you know, something you create. It can be a niche. It doesn't need to be a pre-existing topic. It could be the philosophy of productivity, or it could be, you know, taking a little bit of what you've seen people really resonate with and then adding more of your interests into that, like adding a little bit more of like a philosophical lens to that. It's not always something you discover that sort of you land upon that sort of already existed and now you're in this community of productivity writers. It can be something that you create on your own.
Yeah, and even better if, you know, you kind of have this unique niche. People are like, oh, well, I know who to go to if I want, I don't know, Zen productivity or whatever it is. I love an unexpected juxtaposition. What's better than that? Someone wrote in, I think when we were talking about, you know, how do your second best friends describe you? I love this. People describe me, he thinks so far outside the box that he forgets where the box is and what was in it. Hell yeah. So, you know, then the challenge is to sort of maintain a bridge from this very unique point of view to the reader's life. I think it can be tempting when writing a personal essay or anything to sort of say, okay, well, here's my experience of it. But then if you want readers, you do have to think about, well, what would the reader get out of it? How can I connect to the reader? How can I turn this out a little bit so that it's not just about me and my experience, but what the reader can get out of it? Invite the reader in. There's really, I think, nothing better than writing something. Medium is so much fun and so satisfying for this purpose sometimes, but writing something and then having someone write in the response, oh my God, I didn't know other people felt this way. I thought this was just me, that you just articulated something I never knew I couldn't articulate before. I mean, that's it right there.
Yeah, I think often the things that feel obvious to you aren't necessarily obvious to everyone else.
That's right. Yeah.
And even vice versa, like the things that feel obvious to everyone else may not be obvious to you, and you're just discovering them. I don't know. I also think there's a lot of value in like saying an obvious thing clearly and well.
Right. Yeah. That's,
right?
I mean, what's more satisfying than reading something where somebody really put their finger on something that is the way everybody feels, but just no one could articulate it that way.
Right.
If you can do that, you should do that.
We got another question. Do you need to write consistently in the beginning to build a following? Amy, curious how you would answer this. I would say yes, but not necessarily super frequently. I think in the beginning, quality is maybe a little more important than quantity. So I would think a little more about writing things that you're curious about, that you're really interested in, that feel like your best work, and not necessarily about the consistency thing at the very start. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends what kind of writing we're talking about here.
That's true.
If you're writing on Medium and you really want to build a following on Medium, just think about who you follow on Medium and what you want from those writers. Do you want, maybe you don't want to hear from them every single day. You just want to hear from them when they have something interesting to say. Maybe you do want to hear from them every single day. And I think maybe what's even more significant for building a following, this is like very Medium specific. Well, it's internet. It's not just Medium, but for building a following is interacting with your readers and your followers. Read other stuff on Medium, highlight it, comments on it. Not just in the way where you drop a comment in and say, hey, I wrote something too, read my thing. Not that you would ever do that, but it's like building a following, I think, anywhere on the internet. You have to interact, you have to think about the social parts of it. It's like interacting in real life. Remember interacting in real life? You walk into a room at a party, you don't just start talking. You see what people are talking about. You introduce yourself, you listen a little bit. So I think part of it in terms of building a following is that like interacting with your readers, interacting with other writers, chatting with people in your responses, that kind of thing. And then thinking about what you want to do with your writing. Do you want to have a weekly cadence that maybe is like going to build a brand you're working on, become a newsletter, a regular thing, something like that, because you're giving day-to-day living advice? Or do you want to write something slower and more thoughtful about philosophy? I hate to say it, but it's really up to you. Another question that we have is, what do you say if I like to talk about people, human behaviors, how our minds work, how people say and talk and behave a certain way? I'm just like trying to figure out this question. This is someone who wants to write about psychology, but is not a psychology student. This is what they're saying. So that's a topic, not an angle. It's a subject, not a story. So come up with what your angle is, and that might be where your niche is. Like the the creator behind More to That is not a psychologist. I don't think. I don't know who they are. Not a psychologist, not a psychology student, but has some real interesting observations about human life and a really interesting way to present them. And that's their niche. You got to get an angle.
We got another question. Is it okay to write outside of your niche once you have one that you've defined for yourself and your audience? Is there a risk of watering down your brand? I think that's always fine to write outside of your niche. A niche is a framework that you can ignore whenever you want. It's something you make up for yourself. It's not a creative prison. It's something that gives you freedom, but definitely push yourself outside of it. I think that's just how people grow and how writers grow. Like the writers that I'm most interested in are the people who aren't necessarily the same like this year as they were like 4 or 5 years ago when I started reading them. They're people who grow and change like as they live their life and as things happen to them in the world. And I think that's actually great.
Yeah, like you're a person, you're not a content robot, you know? They have those. They have AI that can churn out very consistent content. That's not what, you know, a person needs to do. And yeah, again, like I think it helps if you think of the niches a way to help yourself always be coming up with fresh ideas and not, like Harris said, a creative prison. I love that. What if the type of content I want to create already exists and someone does it better than me? I mean, I'm going to say that's probably always the case. Like, you know what I mean? Shakespeare, a lot of stuff's been done already. But who cares? It doesn't matter. What does better even mean? Great writing can be you plus a topic, an interesting angle, something you have to say about it. You need them both. And, you know, like I think we've said a couple of times, like you're the part that's going to make that unique. And I don't think you don't have to spin your wheels thinking about, well, is this new? Is it fresh? What do you have to say about it that's new and fresh?
We got a comment that I really love. Not a question, but it's great advice, I think, which is the perfect elevator pitch is one that forces those you are pitching to miss their floor. It needs to be intense. I think that's just like great energy to go into the elevator pitch exercise with.
Yeah, I love that. I will say the best compliment I have ever gotten on any of my writing is when someone told me they were reading one of my books and missed their stop on the subway. I was like, yes, I've arrived. I ruined someone's day.
I love that.
Great job, me. Okay, how do we continue to write if there's nothing more you can write about your niche? A great piece of advice that you may have heard. No one knows what you didn't choose. You can give yourself permission to let ideas sit. You don't have to write about everything. And if there's nothing more you want to write in your niche, then I think it's maybe time to shift a little bit. You know, what else do you want to write about? Like I think about Jane Park, who started off writing really great, very clear, servicey, actionable career advice, and then started feeling like, you know what, I actually want to write is more sort of thoughtful personal essays. Well, that's okay. She still has readers. She still has followers. She's still building her brand too as a writer. Yeah, I think we have time maybe for like 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'm seeing one here. I always say I'm interested in writing about love, food, pain, growth, hope, but these feel too broad to me. Also, I feel like there are too many self-development writers already. How can I winnow this down or combine it? I would sort of ask yourself what connects these topics for you and find the overlap between them. And I also think there's a lot of value in thinking about how you're writing about it, how like the topics that you listed, love, food, pain, growth, those are all pretty broad, but like, what's your way in? What's your story? How like what's the angle that you're sort of approaching those topics with? Yeah, and sort of as Amy said before, like those are topics, they're not stories. And I would think a little bit about what the story is that you want to tell about those things. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're totally right, as always. Yeah, I think there's a writer that I work with who was writing about really serious topics, and she felt like that was really important, and it totally was. And she was often writing about race in America. Super important topic to write about, of course. And she approached me and said, "This is so dumb, but I really want to write. I can't stop thinking about this cake. I had this really funny interaction in my town about this cake that I became obsessed with this cake." She's a teacher at her local, high school or something, and said, I got this cake from Whole Foods and brought it to a staff meeting, and now everyone's obsessed with the cake, and it's sold out all the time, and it's become this huge sensation. And she had all these stories that she wanted to tell about the cake, and and she said, "Well, how can I write about that? It doesn't really go with my whole thing." I said, "I think you just write about it. I think you have a story to tell." And then, of course, when she wrote it, it ended up being about bigger topics, about community, about what we share and how, and it's like one of the most delightful things she's ever written. So if cake is an option, I'm going to say always write about cake. Since we are getting to the end of our time, I want to share one more time this post on Creators Hub. That's sort of like the cheat sheet from this here workshop. Please, if there's anything that you've written in this workshop that you want to share, feel free to drop it in the responses. Keep checking into Creators Hub for more writing advice, more medium advice, our upcoming workshops. We also have writing hours.
Yes.
Our writing hours come to every Thursday. Say it. Thursdays at 4:30 Eastern, which means various things to various people. For now, we're experimenting with just doing it at that time for the next couple of months and just see what happens. And you can just come and join us on a Zoom. If I'm smart enough, I will be able to find the link and drop it in. And yeah, and it's just, we just sit there and listen to calm music and write. And it's just like a nice way to get some writing done on Medium or anywhere else. Is there anything else we need to say?
I don't think so. I'm gonna drop the writing hour.
Oh, thank goodness. That was too much for me to do and talk at the same time. Yeah, and everyone is welcome to that. And we also have some great workshops coming up about writing great headlines and something else. Oh, and discovering your sort of big story. Yes, they're all listed in that post. Thank you.
1 second.
Thank you so much all for joining us.
Yeah, this was great. And we will record this. We were recording it, and we'll share the recording in Creators Hub. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Are those all your things to say? I think so.
I think they are.
Thank you.